Good morning. Good morning. Now, we were talking about the Rajput economy in our previous class. याद है कुछ इसके बारे में? बताइए क्या characteristics? Dependent primarily on agriculture, trade and commerce, declining, emergence of a feudalized, local, self-sufficient village economy. What was the effect of this? Shrinking of resources available to the state. Why? The revenue decentralization and the proliferation of land grants, where large quantities of state wealth, sovereign wealth were transferred to Brahmins and temples. Okay? What was the impact of this? Administrative decentralization, central weakness, political as well as military, the growing wealth of temples. And what were the temples doing with this wealth that was accumulating? Were they investing it to further promote growth? No, they were primarily hoarding it. इसका result क्या हुआ इस dichotomy का? हाँ, attack on temples, the growth of Turkish invasions later on. Does this mean that no trade and commerce existed between the 10th and 12th centuries? Itinerant trade always existed because of ecological and climatic variations. Even in highly localized systems, all necessary things being consumed at the local level could not be locally produced. Therefore, some industries continued to flourish. Trade was happening at two levels. Local trade, वहाँ पे किस तरह के goods produce किए जा रहे थे? Pottery, utensils, some cloth, etc. Right? And long distance trade or relatively long distance trade, regional trade में metallic tools, right? What else? Weapons. What else? Luxury items, oil, cloth, etc. Right? These were being produced for exchange over long distances. लिख लें इसको, write down. During the Rajput period, comma, the existing pattern of economic development continued as before. Full stop. That is, the economy became more and more feudalized. It was characterized by one by one in the form of subpoints. You can write down. Emergence of agriculture as the chief occupation. Or did the rulers and other institutions take any measures to promote agriculture? Kya? Irrigational facilities were expanded both at the expense of the state as well as temples. Okay? So write down the Rajput rulers, subpoint उसके अंदर, the Rajput rulers, feudal lords and other large landowners such as temples and Brahmins attempted to increase agricultural productivity, attempted to increase agricultural productivity through the construction of canals, tanks, reservoirs, and step wells, full stop. Dams were also raised, dams were also raised, full stop. Next sub point. Due to the improvement of irrigation facilities, agricultural yield improved, agricultural yield improved. However, cultivators were often exploited by the feudatories, by the feudatories, often exploited by the feudatories. ठीक है? What was the chief source of state income? Land revenue only. So next point, एक तो आपने देखा कि irrigation as the main occupation. Next वाले लिखो, taxation, taxation from land revenue was the chief source of incomes for the state, of income for the state. Full stop. What was the basis for land revenue? किस बेसिस पे कलेक्ट किया जाता था? Were there any determinants? Quality of soil, the type of crops being grown, availability of artificial irrigation, etc. किस बेसिस पे? ठीक है? So write down the rate of land revenue depended on soil fertility, availability of irrigation facilities, and crop variety, In which form was tax mostly collected? Cash or kind? Kind. Why? Because monetization of the local economy was not very high. Okay? Majority of the tax was collected in the form of cash. However, some kinds. However, some tax was also collected in cash form. Write down. Tax could be collected both in cash and kind. Full stop. However, due to the low intensity of monetization, comma, it was collected mostly in kind. ठीक है? Now, although agricultural yield was increasing, it did not necessarily mean an increase in state income because of revenue decentralization, which was the norm of the time as a result of increasing feudalism. Okay, write down. Due to sub point इसी में taxation, due to The growth of feudalism, comma, the the Rajput taxation system, the Rajput taxation system was characterized by decentralization. Full stop. The bulk of Rajput agricultural land was in the hands of feudatories who enjoyed tax exemptions. Who enjoyed tax exemptions. ठीक है, ये हो गया टैक्सेशन सिस्टम. अच्छा, इसमें एक पॉइंट और लिख सकते हो आप. राइट डाउन अनदर सब पॉइंट. द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ रेवेन्यू शॉर्टेज, the problem of revenue shortage was further exacerbated by the proliferation of land grants to temples and Brahmins who also enjoyed tax exemptions. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया टैक्सेशन. नेक्स्ट, सेकेंडरी इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज. लिखो. The Rajput economy had strong elements of localization and self-sufficiency. Full stop. These are the classic characteristics of a feudal socio-economic setup. Full stop. As such, next point, as such, trade, commerce and crafts production exhibited the elements of decline. Next subpoint. However, they were not entirely absent. Next subpoint. Some local industries existed to fulfill local and regional demand. Including textiles, weapons, manufacture of salt, metallurgy, pottery, jewelry, etc. Full stop. Next subpoint. However, the volume of production was rather subdued and tilted in favor of local consumption. Tilted in favor of local consumption. ठीक है. Next subpoint. With the decline of long distance trade, comma, merchant guilds such as Shrenis and Ganas largely disappeared from North India. Largely disappeared from North India. Full stop. So how did the people of North India obtain foreign goods or goods which were produced in far off places of India? They depended upon foreign traders or traders in different parts of India to bring external goods to them and to take goods manufactured in their regions to other places. So खुद के local traders पे और they were no longer dependent. ठीक है? Write down. Next sub point. As such, comma, the local demand for distant and foreign goods could not be fulfilled by local traders. And the North Indian economy became heavily dependent upon the services of external agents such as बताओ, Arabs and South Indians. Of external agents such as Arabs and South Indians. ठीक है? Now, what was the picture of trade, commerce and craft production in South India like at this point of time? It was flourishing. ठीक है? तो चोला एम्पायर के इन्फ्लुएंस में, राष्ट्रकूटास के इन्फ्लुएंस में trade, commerce, urbanization had continued to grow. What was the state of the guilds in South India? They were also quite strong. Some important guilds, कुछ नाम उनके, the Ayavol Trade Guild, Manigramam Trade Guild, Anjuvanam Trade Guild. Ayavol Trade Guild or Manigramam Trade Guild were Indian. However, the Anjuvanam Trade Guild consisted of foreign traders, primarily Arab traders. The word Anjumanam comes from the Arab word Anjuman or meeting or an assembly. ठीक है, तो ये Indian as well as foreign trade guilds were conducting brisk trade throughout the subcontinent with their base in South India primarily. So the center of gravity, economically speaking, in terms of the secondary economic activities, had shifted from north towards the south. So write down several guilds from South India, such as the Manigramam, Ayyavol, and Anjuvanam, controlled Indian trade, both local and foreign. Both local and foreign. ठीक है. What was the impact of the loss of control on trade on the local rulers in North India? क्या impact पड़ा? Loss of revenue. ठीक है, so write down the dependence of the Rajput states on foreign traders resulted in loss of revenue. Resulted in loss of revenue. Full stop. This further added to the economic strain on the royal treasury. ठीक है, ये हो गया है थर्ड एस्पेक्ट ऑफ द राजपूत इकोनॉमी, द सेकेंडरी इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज. फोर्थ वन राइट. पहला हमने देखा था क्या? पहला एग्रीकल्चर देखा था, दूसरा टैक्सेशन देखा था, तीसरा सेकेंडरी इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज. फोर्थ वन लिखो. इनइक्वालिटी एंड concentration of wealth. Inequality and concentration of wealth. Full stop. The Rajput economy was characterized by the presence of a huge wealth gap between the classes. Full stop. Next point. The feudal social setup ensured that the bulk of the surplus being produced at the level of cultivators was appropriated by the elites. That is, rulers and feudatories. Full stop. Next sub point. This led to widespread poverty at the lower levels and a vulgar concentration of wealth at the upper levels. Now, in the modern society, हम क्या देखते हैं? With the concentration of capital, what happens? Enterprise, progress takes place, growth happens, right? Constructive activities take place. What happened in the context of feudal Rajput states? Constructive activities हो पाई? नहीं हो पाई, because the elites were preoccupied with warfare primarily, with internal as well as external competition. As such, all the accumulated wealth capital was wasted in destructive pursuits. ठीक है? Therefore, it did not result in any positive results or growth. Clear? Write down. However, the accumulated capital at the upper levels was squandered and did not produce. Squandered मतलब wasted. Squandered and did not produce any positive results or constructive results. Any constructive results. Full stop. सब पॉइंट लिखो इसके अंदर. It was either wasted in military conflict or devolved through land grants and cash endowments. To temples and Brahmins. ठीक है? Now, what was the result of a large amount of land grants to temples and Brahmins? They emerged as huge land owners. They also were receiving large amount of cash grants. Write down. Next point. इसमें लिखो. Temples emerged as extremely wealthy institutions due to the receipt of royal grants and endowments. Sub point लिखो. However, in the absence of sufficient secondary economic activities, they could not constructively invest their accumulated wealth. Full stop. Next sub point. Therefore, they emerged as hoarders of wealth. Hoarders of wealth. ठीक है? Why were they giving endowments to temples? Because temples में Brahmins थे and Brahmins were the ones who could confirm their status as legitimate rulers. क्योंकि ideological leadership तो इनके हाथ में थी. It only they had the key to win popular support and legitimacy in the eyes of the people for these rulers. ठीक है? तो ये function perform कर रहे थे. That is why the kings depended upon the support of these temples. Further, जो temples है ना, they also emerged as veritable symbols of royal power. मैंने देखो इतना बड़ा टेम्पल बनवाया है, therefore I am sovereign. God is smiling upon me. He has blessed me personally. So this was the aura that the Rajput rulers and feudal lords were chasing, and temples were providing this facility for them. ये उनके लिए service provide कर रहे थे. They were confirming all of these ideas in the popular consciousness. तो भाई कोई भी आप सर्विस परफॉर्म करते हो किसी के लिए, you expect something in return. That is what these people demanded in return. Temples were endowed with rich cash endowments and land grants. Brahmins were also equally richly rewarded. ठीक है? That is the relation. Reciprocal relationship एक इमर्ज हो गया. इसीलिए हम बोलते हैं priest prince alliance or the Rajput Brahmin alliance, which is more relevant for this. ठीक? Impact of, give the next subheading, impact of the Rajput economy. Impact of the Rajput economy. लिखो. The Rajputs presided over a feudal economy resulting in A, resource strain, B, wasteful military expenditure, C, loss of human resource through frequent warfare, D, political decentralization due to the emergence of economically powerful feudatories, E, proliferation of land grants, F, proliferation of land grants, F, suppressed secondary economic activities. क्या क्या देखा है हमने? Resource crunch, financial strain on the states, wasteful expenditure in the form of military expenditure, loss of manpower, human resource through frequent warfare, diversion of state funds and tax base because of the rise of feudalism, and land grants and suppressed economic activities, secondary economic activities. Next point, write down. As such, the Rajput rulers were never able to achieve the political stability, economic stability needed for consolidation and expansion. Full stop. Next subpoint. They remained perpetually entangled in low level conflicts with their immediate neighbors and their own feudatories. With their immediate neighbors and their own feudatories. Next subpoint. As such, the scope of Rajput relations was distinctly local. Next subpoint. The resource crunch faced by the state prepared the economic foundations for permanent hostility among Rajputs. Full stop. Next subpoint, next main point. As such, the Rajputs were neither willing nor able to expand the scope of their strategic vision or planning. Subpoint. The dangerous northwestern frontier was largely ignored. ठीक है? On the other hand, next main point. On the other hand, main point. Temples emerged as easy targets for any would-be invader. Subpoint. Not only did they hold enormous wealth, they were also virtual symbols of royal power. Next subpoint. Looting and destroying temples was therefore doubly beneficial. Was therefore doubly beneficial. डबल बेनिफिट होगा इससे. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, एक तो उससे वेल्थ मिल जाएगा. सेकंड, यू कैन delegitimize the ruler of the local kingdom, that the king has not been able to defend the temple itself, the god, he has not been able to defend the people. It is also going to have a negative effect on local morale. ठीक है, because the temple is a center around which the entire society revolves. अगर उसी को डिस्ट्रॉय कर दोगे तो the society becomes flattened after that. It is going to lose the will to fight, क्योंकि अब डिफेंड करने के लिए कुछ बचा ही नहीं है. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. as such comma the Turkish invaders began regularly attacking North Indian temples from the 10th century onwards. Full stop. Subpoint. The Rajput rulers did not have the resources or preparedness to provide a solid defense. ठीक है, so this was the result of all these invasions. Oh, sorry, this economic decline, economic transformation. ये हो गया Rajput economy. With this, we have covered the history of the Rajputs in the early medieval age. Now, we had ended on the note of Turkish invasions, and although these Turkish invasions were quite destructive, दो waves में हुए, first under the Ghaznavids, then later under the Ghurids, separated by almost 150 years between them. Right? Now, during the first round of invasions, along with the invaders, some scholars also came to India. Right? And the most famous among them was Al-Biruni. And it is important to understand Al-Biruni's picture of India. Okay? When did he come to India? 1017. Till when did he stay in India? 1030. With whom did he come to India? Mahmud of Ghazni. What was his purpose in coming to India? He wanted to understand Hindu society, culture, customs, ethics, philosophy, education and science. He also wanted to compare Hindu society with other societies. He believed that Hindus have some important knowledge to offer and the world at large could benefit from it. But Hindus generally have a negative attitude towards Muslims because of the painful history of Ghaznavid invasions. Therefore, he wanted to heal the divide between Hindus and Muslims. Further, Mahmud of Ghazni believed that despite the Al-Biruni believed that despite the disparity in culture, beliefs, etc., there is a divine plan that all men are created equal and they have the same creator. So he also wanted to become a bridge between the Hindu and Islamic civilizations. Further, he also wanted to satisfy his own personal intellectual curiosity. He also wanted to change the notions that contemporary scholars in the Muslim civilization had towards Indians, right? He wanted to change perceptions in the Muslim world towards Indians. The majority of the Muslim scholars of this period dismissed Indians as either heretics or barbarians. Al-Biruni thought that the picture was more complex. There is more to be learned. He also had some element of sympathy with Indians. Now, Al-Biruni himself was a Shiite Muslim from Khwarizm, right? The Ghaznavids were Sunnis from Afghanistan, from Ghazni. Now, the activities of the Ghaznavids in Khwarizm were very much similar to their activities in India. वहाँ पे भी जा करके लूट पाट मार काट यही सब किया उन्होंने. Therefore, he sympathized with Indians and wanted to present them in a favorable light as well. Further, in this task, he was given a royal patronage as well. Now, why was Mahmud of Ghazni providing patronage to Al-Biruni? It was normal for sultans and rulers of that time to promote scholarship and learning. It was a matter of prestige for them. This was something that was expected of a great ruler, that he is going to adorn his court with the great scholars, artists, architects of his age. Okay? So Ghazni was also searching for legitimacy by providing patronage to learning. Further, he also, through these scholars, wanted to improve his reputation in the Islamic world. Islamic world के बाकी rulers, people उसको किस नजर से देखते थे? As a violent barbarian, primarily. He wanted to whitewash this image. Okay? So he wanted to improve his reputation. In pursuit of these objectives, he patronized several scholars such as Firdausi. Firdausi ने एक किताब लिखी शाहनामा, in which he has given a eulogistic account of the Sultan. He also invited the Iranian physician and philosopher Ibn Sina to his court, लेकिन इसने आने से मना कर दिया. He also forcibly brought Al-Biruni to his court, right? तो एक तो ये political objective था, ideological objective. Another objective behind royal patronage was, especially in the context of India, that he wanted scholars with first hand knowledge of Indian society, polity, culture and languages. क्यों? Because this would prove useful when he invaded India. कई लोगों के साथ negotiate करना पड़ेगा. You would need to recruit some builders, some workers, some soldiers even, right? He would need to talk with the locals to ascertain important details on the ground level. That is why it made sense for him. Clear है इतना? Ultimately, after his travels, Al-Biruni compiled an Arabic text known as the Kitab-ul-Hind, also known as the Tawarikh-e-Hind. It is colloquially also called Tarikh-e-Hind or the Tahqiq-e-Hind. ठीक है? It is an encyclopedic compilation about Indian society, religion, philosophy, geography, sciences and attitudes. The work is unique because of the methodology employed by Al-Biruni. He has not written a normative text like the Puranas, जिसमें basically genealogies of kings को historical information के through present किया जाता है, or the normal tarikhs of the Muslim civilization in which chronological details are given about various kings and dynasties. Rather, he has used a critical and scientific approach. And thus, his work has one aspect which all other contemporary literature lacks. It is analytical in nature. Okay? Another important aspect of his approach is his comparative approach. He compares the Indian civilization with the Muslim world, with the Iranian civilization and the Greek civilization. Wherever Al-Biruni thinks that he lacks proper knowledge, he freely admits it. So Al-Biruni was aware of his limitations. Due to the motivations that drove him, Al-Biruni presents a refreshing approach in that he is not guided by religious ideology, right? So he has an approach that is largely free from religious bias. Al-Biruni based his writings upon several previous Sanskrit works. He consulted many of them, he directly quotes many of them. Okay? So it is based on several Sanskrit works for which he himself learnt Sanskrit. He also based his observations on conversations with learned Indians. He provides a large amount of rich geographical information, which he claims is based upon direct observation. He visited several places. And the approach applied by him makes the Kitab-ul-Hind an extremely authentic source for 11th century India. Okay? Now, what he says specifically about the Indian society, learning, religion, वो थोड़ी देर में देखते हैं. पहले ये इंट्रोडक्टरी पोर्शन लिख लेते हैं. Give the heading Al-Biruni's India. Al-Biruni's India. He was a Persian scholar. He was a Persian scholar from Khwarizm. Persian scholar from Khwarizm. हाँ नहीं, मोरक्कन ये नहीं है, इब्न बतूता है. He would come during the reign of Muhammad bin. ये Persian scholar है. He was a Persian scholar from Khwarizm. Who was in service of Mahmud of Ghazni. Mahmud of Ghazni. He was, next point, he was a polymath and had extensive knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, physics, geography, medicine, theology, logic and philosophy. ठीक है, तो बचपन से पढ़ाई करी थी केवल, राइट. एंड नेक्स्ट पॉइंट राइट डाउन. He arrived in India. He arrived in India in 1017. In 1017, with the army of Ghaznavi. With the army of Ghaznavi as a freelance observer. As a freelance observer. Next point. He traveled extensively and studied the religion, language, philosophy and society of the Hindus and wrote an Arabic text called the Kitab-ul-Hind और तवारीख-ए-हिंद और तहकीक-ए-हिंद और तहकीक-ए-हिंद. Next point. Due to his contributions, he is considered as the founder of Indology. As the founder of Indology. ठीक है. And because of, same point, and because of his keen insights into Indian society, he is also considered as the first anthropologist. As the first anthropologist. ठीक है. This was an introduction about Al-Biruni. Now, give the subheading motivations of Al-Biruni for writing the Kitab-ul-Hind. For writing the Kitab-ul-Hind. Number 1, scientific and intellectual curiosity. Scientific and intellectual curiosity. Write down. Al-Biruni was naturally curious about human nature and customs, and wanted to understand that determined the thought process of the Hindus. Okay? For example, in the first chapter of his book, he has talked about why Hindus hate Muslims. और क्या explanation दिया है? Because of the invasions, the violent interaction, the Hindus distrust the Muslims and consider them to be outsiders, barbarians, and non-believers in their faith. They consider them to be foreign exploiters. Write down the point. For example, Al-Biruni analyzes the factor for Hindu hatred towards Muslims. Full stop. Firstly, he points out that Hindus and Muslims follow completely different religions, and secondly, Hindus have the painful memory of Turkish invasions. Full stop. Moreover, moreover, Hindus considered the Muslims to be impure. To be impure. ठीक है? तो पहला हो गया understanding, that is scientific curiosity and intellectual curiosity. Second, write down establishing a connection between Hindus and Muslims. ठीक है? लिखो within this. 11th century India was hostile to outsiders, especially Muslims. Full stop. However, Al-Biruni felt that Indians had several pearls of wisdom to offer, to the Islamic world, Full stop. Next point. Conversely, India would also benefit from deeper contact with Islam. Thus, it was important. Thus, it was important to establish a connection between the two civilizations. Between the two civilizations. Next, number 3. Al-Biruni also wanted to remove negative stereotypes. To remove negative stereotypes and misconceptions against Hindus in the Islamic world. In the Islamic world. Full stop. Sub point लिखो. The majority of Muslim scholars dismissed Hindus as barbarians and heretics. Full stop. Next sub point. This was leading to intense hatred and hostility and was preventing positive cultural exchange. Positive cultural exchange. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया नंबर 3, challenging the perceptions in the Muslim world towards Indians. Next, right, number 4, comparative study of different religions and cultures. Sub point, he wanted to identify the similarities and differences between Indian culture and other civilizations. To understand the process of social, philosophical and scientific development. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट कौन सा, नंबर 5. Al-Biruni also sympathized with Indians. Next sub point, both his people in Khwarizm, and Indians had suffered at the hands of Turkish invaders, especially Mahmud of Ghazni. Full stop. Next subpoint. Therefore, Al-Biruni wanted to present history from the Indian perspective. Next point, sixth number. To unfold God's divine plan. Write down subpoint. Al-Biruni believed in the unity of mankind and was thus determined to act as a bridge between the Hindu and Islamic civilizations. Okay. Next, number 7. Mahmud of Ghazni also provided rich patronage to learning and art. Full stop. Subpoint. Al-Biruni was a product of this rich cultural environment characterized by intellectual freedom, scientific inquiry, and imaginative expression. Full stop. Subpoint. For Mahmud of Ghazni, patronage to scholarship was a matter of prestige. Full stop. By supporting the most famous scholars of his period, he wanted to showcase his power and wealth. Next sub point. It was also a matter of legitimacy. It was also a matter of legitimacy. As Mahmud, sorry, as it was traditional, as it was traditional duty of contemporary sultans, as it was traditional duty of contemporary sultans to promote scholars, Next subpoint. Moreover, Mahmud of Ghazni had earned a poor reputation, for his cruelty and bloodshed. Full stop. He wanted to repair it. Through these scholars. As such, अगला सब point. As such, he provided patronage to famous scholars such as Firdausi and Al-Biruni. Firdausi and Al-Biruni. However, he was unable to convince the famous Persian physician and philosopher, to serve at his court. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. Mahmud of Ghazni also patronized Al-Biruni for practical reasons. Full stop. Subpoint. He wanted scholars with first-hand knowledge. Of Indian society, polity, culture, and languages. In order to help him during military raids and negotiations. In India. ठीक है? Now, the strengths of the Kitab-ul-Hind. You can give the subheading. Strengths of the Kitab-ul-Hind. Strengths of the Kitab-ul-Hind. लिखो। Al-Biruni divided his encyclopedic work into 80 chapters, dealing with the subjects such as religion, philosophy, society, geography, the sciences, and attitudes of Indians. Full stop. Next point. He has employed a unique structure in his writing. ठीक है? So all of his chapters begin with a question. ठीक है? Then in the middle part he talks about the relevant aspects of the Indian society. For example, अगर साइंसेस की बात है तो इंडिया के डिटेल्स देगा. And in the end, concluding portion में क्या करता है? He compares the Indian conditions with the foreign conditions with contemporary cultures. Write down. He employs a distinctive character, unique structure in his writing. Sub point लिखो. He begins each chapter with a question. Next sub point. This is followed by a description based on Sanskrit literature. Next sub point. He concludes by comparison with other cultures. ठीक है? Apart from this approach, next point. Apart from this structure and depth of knowledge, comma, the Kitab-ul-Hind has many other strengths. One by one, 1, 2, 3, 4 करके and write. Number 1, it is a genuine primary source. Of information about socio-religious conditions. Next point. Al-Biruni employs a critical and scientific approach towards the Indian society, Full stop. Unlike the prevalent Puranic literature, which focuses upon recording genealogies or the Islamic Tariq tradition of narrating Tariq tradition of narrating political history chronologically, comma, the Kitab-ul-Hind is highly analytical. Full stop. Next point. Al-Biruni doesn't simply present facts. Full stop. He also analyzes factors behind them and even presents a comparative account. Full stop. Next point. The Kitab-ul-Hind is especially refreshing due to Al-Biruni's awareness of his personal limitations, which he freely admits. Next point. This work was driven by Al-Biruni's intellectual curiosity and is free from any religious bias. Full stop. Subpoint. This allows Al-Biruni to evaluate Indians objectively. Full stop. Next point. Next main point. He has also used an innovative research methodology ensuring accuracy and authenticity. Full stop. He has consulted he has consulted several Sanskrit works such as the Bhagavad Gita, comma, the Vishnu Puran, comma, the Sankhya of Kapil, comma, the works of Patanjali, and a large body of scientific literature, Full stop. Next sub point. Along with this, he also consulted the oral tradition, and compares them, and compares the literary and oral tradition, Full stop. Next sub point. Direct observation. Next sub point. Direct observation was another source of information, or was another tool used by Al-Biruni. To gather information. ठीक है. Next main point लिखो. These characteristics make the Kitab-ul-Hind a rich and authentic source of early medieval India. Full stop. ठीक है. So these are the strengths of the Kitab-ul-Hind. क्या क्या strengths हमने discuss किए हैं? First of all, the structuring. किस तरह का structuring है? Question answer format में है, along with a comparison with other cultures. Secondly, his critical, scientific and objective approach, his reliance upon a variety of sources, his freedom from any prejudice, his analytical approach, where he does not simply present facts but analyzes the factors behind them, his tendency to compare conditions in India with the rest of the world, lending greater utility, his awareness of his own limitations and his freely admitting them. So all this makes his works quite unique as well as useful. ये हो गए strengths of the Kitab-ul-Hind. अब क्या देखना है? Actually क्या चीज लिखी है इसने, right? So the contents within which we should know about what he has written about Indian society, learning and science, religion and philosophy, polity, geography, etc. ठीक है, क्या हुआ? तो first of all, Indian society. What were the important observations made by him? It is a caste-ridden society. He has described the Chatuvarna system, where he mentions four varnas which were hierarchically arranged. कौन से? Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. He also talks about the origin of these four varnas. क्या बोलता है? He has given the Vedic understanding. So पुरुष सुक्ता हिम में क्या बताया गया है? The पुरुष made sacrifice के through. Brahmins from the mouth of the Buddha, Kshatriyas from the arms of the Buddha, Vaishyas from the thighs of the Buddha, and Shudras from the feet of the Brahma. Brahma बोलना था, बुद्धा बोल रहा था मैं, right? From the feet of the Brahma. तो इस तरह से explain किया है. This also provides the logical basis for hierarchical arrangement. Right? He also says that Brahmins were considered to be the purest and most learned. He observes that Varna status was based on birth. Further, he also observed the practice of untouchability. He also observed that Vaishyas were almost equal in status to the Shudras. He also observed the presence of many social evils. He observes that the position of women was inferior to that of men. Right? तो ये सारी चीजें ये ऑब्जर्व करता है about the Indian society. He also compares certain aspects of the Indian society with some other cultures, civilizations. For example, caste system को compare करता है, varna system को with the Persian class system. Right? So Persians also divided their society into four classes. Priests and princes and warriors at the top, followed by philosophers and scholars of various kinds. फिर उसके बाद priests आते हैं and finally various artisans, craftsmen, farmers etc. ये सब आते हैं. So he says that दोनों में linkage है. Clear? Write down. Indian society. Indian society. According to Al-Biruni, the Indian society was caste-ridden. Full stop. Next point. It was based on the fourfold Varna system. which he calls the Chatuvarna system. The Chatuvarna system. The Chatuvarna system. He also discusses the theory of origin based on the Purush Sukta hymn. Based on the Purush Sukta hymn. Next subpoint. He observed that the four Varnas did not live or dine together. Did not live or dine together. Next point. Next main point. Next main point. Al-Biruni also mentions the presence of untouchables. He lists 8 अंत्यज castes. कल के क्लास में बताया था ना अंत्यज castes, who were below the Shudras and outside the Varna system. Outside the Varna system. Next subpoint. They belonged primarily to various craft groups. Various craft groups. Next subpoint. Additionally, other communities of untouchables such as Chandalas, Domas, Bhedas, etc. were linked to unclean professions such as manual scavenging, disposal of dead bodies, etc. Full stop. Subpoint. Al-Biruni has also provided an explanation for their emergence. Full stop. He mentions that they are considered to be illegitimate children. To be illegitimate children of Shudra men and Brahmin women. Thus indicating Brahmanical hostility towards Varna intermixing. Towards Varna intermixing. ठीक है? Now What about the question of salvation? Was it possible for people belonging to all four varnas to attain salvation or not? Possible था या नहीं था? Al-Biruni informs us that opinions differed. Some scholars said that it was not possible, some scholars said that it was possible. तो जिन्होंने बोला not possible, उन्होंने क्या बोला कि for whom was it possible to attain salvation? Only the Brahmins and Kshatriyas. So Vaishyas and Shudras, it was not possible. So write down. Next point. Main point. According to Al-Biruni, Indian opinion differed on the question of attaining salvation. Subpoint. While some denied the possibility of salvation, to Shudras and Vaishyas, others accepted it. ठीक है? Others accepted it. Full stop. Next main point. Al-Biruni also presents an interesting comparison of India's Varna system with the Persian system for social division. So India में we have the Brahmin, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras ना. In the ancient Persian society, we had 4 classes. सबसे पहले the princes and warriors, followed by monks and priests, followed by scholars and professionals such as philosophers, lawyers, doctors, etc. And lastly, peasants and craftsmen, the working population. Okay, so we can write this down. According to him, उसी point में, according to him, the fourfold Varna system was similar yet distinct to the Persian system. Who divided their society into 4 classes. Namely, A, B, C, D करके लिख लो ये 4. Princes and warriors, monks and priests, philosophers, lawyers and doctors, and the peasants and craftsmen. ठीक है? Next main point लिखो. Al-Biruni observed that there were no significant differences between Vaishyas and Shudras. Between Vaishyas and Shudras. Significant differences between Vaishyas and Shudras. Full stop. तो ये हमने पिछली क्लास में ऑलरेडी देख लिया था, राइट? नेक्स्ट पॉइंट राइट डाउन. Al-Biruni analyzes the closed nature of the Indian society. The closed nature of the Indian society. क्या बोलता है? That there were restrictions on foreign travel, overseas travel, right? He also says that Indians had an isolationist attitude because of their superiority complex and deliberately avoided any contact with outsiders who were considered to be impure. Okay? Write down. Al-Biruni observes, subpoint. Al-Biruni observes that there were strict restrictions on long distance and overseas travel. Full stop. Next subpoint. Additionally, comma, Al-Biruni also identified the false sense of superiority of Indians as an important factor behind their isolationism. Full stop. According to him, Indians considered all outsiders as impure and all external knowledge as inferior. ठीक है? Full stop. And what was the result of this? The stagnation of knowledge, growing localism. Okay? Now, one way in which we can interpret the growing isolation and localization of the Indian society is also in context of feudalism. Okay? Write down. Next point. These developments were not surprising in the context of feudal localism. Okay? Now, apart from this, Al-Biruni also observed a number of social evils. Write down. Next main point. He also identified a number of social evils such as child marriage, sati, the inferior position of women in general, and widows in particular, and widows in particular. ठीक है? Next point, next sub point. He also condemned the practice of untouchability and observed widespread poverty and inequality. Widespread poverty and inequality. ठीक है? So ये हो गए social evils. Next aspect of the society that he talks about, intellectual pursuits. ठीक है? क्या बोलता है यहाँ पर? Is the society or is free thinking encouraged? Is intellectual curiosity encouraged? No, ये सब discourage किया जाता है. Write down. Next main point. According to Al-Biruni, comma, freedom of thought, expression and intellectual pursuit were discouraged. Who does he blame for this? The learned people, the Brahmins. Write down. Next sub point. For this, he blames Brahmins. Full stop. He accuses them of being insulators of knowledge. And criticizes them for concealing the truth and allowing the common people to believe in falsehoods and superstitions. ठीक है? Now, according to Al-Biruni, this was a more serious sin than bad knowledge or falsehood itself. That means you are not being truthful to truth, the idea of truth. आपको सच पता है, लेकिन आप लोगों को कन्विंस कर रहे हो गलत चीजों को बिलीव करने के लिए. So he says that this was a more serious challenge, a more serious mistake than bad knowledge or belief in falsehoods itself. Okay, write down. According to him, sub point. According to him, this was a more serious violation of the idea of truthfulness to truth. In Arabic tradition, it is known as al-haq. More serious violation of truthfulness to truth than believing in falsehood. Believing in falsehood. ठीक है, समझ में आया ना ये? नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो. A result of this intellectual corruption, a result of this intellectual corruption and insularity was the stagnation of knowledge. Was the stagnation of knowledge. ठीक है, write down. Al-Biruni was highly impressed. Sub point. Al-Biruni was highly impressed by the rich heritage of past knowledge, especially in mathematics and astronomy. But laments the stagnation of intellectual production What are the reasons for this? जो हम already discuss कर चुके हैं. That means not being truthful to truth, exclusivity of education, insular attitude concerning any external knowledge to be inferior to their own knowledge. Apart from all of this, it was the association of education with religion. ठीक है, write down. For this, sub point. For this, Al-Biruni believes that the mixing of religious notions with science were responsible. Religious notions with science were responsible. ठीक है? On the whole, what does Al-Biruni state about the status of Indian education, learning and science? It is a mixture of pearls and sour dates. ठीक है, तो दोनों का मिक्सचर है. कुछ आपको मिलेगा the highest levels of intellectual development, and on the other hand, at the same level in the eyes of Indians are going to be some patently false and superstitious beliefs. ठीक है, so write down next sub point. Al-Biruni therefore concludes that Indian knowledge is a mixture of pearls and sour dates. Pearls and sour dates. Pearls and sour dates. The sad thing is that Indians consider both to be equal. Since they have lost all rational thought and methods of scientific deduction. Methods of scientific deduction. ठीक है? So these are the things he observes about Indian society. Apart from this, he also makes some observations about Indian customs, the peculiar practices of Indians in their daily life. क्या बोलता है ये? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इंडियंस के दांत किस रंग के होते हैं? रेड टीथ. क्यों? पान चबाने की वजह से, राइट? तो कंटिन्यूअसली पान चबाते रहते हैं तो लाल दांत होते हैं. He observes that Indians plate their mustache into a single plate. तो जनरली नेचुरली दो जहां से निकलता है, तो क्या बोलता है कि एक साइड पे प्लेट करते हैं, राइट? सिंगल प्लेटेड mustache. He also says that many Indians take a lot of pride in not clipping their fingernails, right? ऐसा क्यों? Because it shows everybody who sees their long fingernails, यार ये बड़ा रईस आदमी होगा, इसको काम करने की जरूरत नहीं है, right? In order to glorify their idleness. He also says that Indians ride horses bareback, right? बिना किसी सीट के, सैडल के घोड़े पे चढ़ जाते हैं. They also have peculiar dress. So most Indian men wear turbans, tunics, jackets and trousers. But some men also wear articles of female clothing. And jewelry. For example, necklaces, rings on their fingers, toes, earrings, etc. तो ये सब पहनते हैं. He further observes that unlike the rest of the world, Indians consume alcohol before or after eating? Before eating. बाकी दुनिया में after eating, right? He observes that Indian men do not seek permission before entering the house. तो घर में आना होता है तो बिना पूछे घुस जाते हैं, but they seek permission before leaving the house. जाने के पहले पूछते हैं निकले क्या, right? So that happens. So seeking permission before leaving the house. He says that Indians do not consume the meat of cows but have no reservations about sipping cow stool, cow urine. ठीक है? इस तरह के observations उसने किए हैं. Clear? So you can write a few of them. He has also made हाँ new main point. अभी सोसाइटी में ही है, ठीक है? He has also made some interesting observations about Indian customs. Indian customs. Full stop. Number 1, Indians have red teeth. Indians have red teeth due to chewing betel leaves with areca nut and chalk. बीटल लीव्स, पान का पत्ता, अरेका नट, सुपारी एंड चौक, चूना. ठीक है, पान बन गया ना, एंड चौक. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट, मोस्ट इंडियंस divide their mustache into a single plate. Into a single plate. Next sub point, many Indians do not clip their fingernails to glorify their idleness. Fingernails to glorify their idleness. Next sub point, according to him, Indians do not use saddles to ride horses. Next sub point, men wear turbans, tunics, jackets and trousers, but also men wear turbans, tunics, jackets and trousers, but also use articles of female dress such as cosmetics and jewelry. Next sub point, he amusingly observes that Indians drink alcohol before eating. Next sub point, according to him, men don't seek permission before entering the house, rather while leaving it. Before leaving the house, rather before leaving it. ठीक है? So these are Al-Biruni's observations regarding Indian society and customs. क्या क्या देखा है हमने? Caste ridden society, comparison with Persian society, explanation for caste system, untouchability, explanation for untouchability, the stagnation of Indian knowledge, the insular attitude of the society, the Indian customs or growing localization of the society. ठीक है? These are the things that Al-Biruni observed. Take down a question. Give an account of Al-Biruni's observations regarding Indian society, give an account of Al-Biruni's observations regarding Indian society. Full stop. Analyze the Kitab-ul-Hind. Analyze the strengths of Kitab-ul-Hind. Analyze the strengths of Kitab-ul-Hind for understanding early medieval society or Rajput society. Understanding Rajput society. Full stop. 20 marks, 250 words. हो जाएगा? Analyze the strengths of Kitab-ul-Hind to understand the Rajput society. Clear है? चलिए then. So one aspect of the content we have covered. Next class में ये सब cover करेंगे and then we are going to talk about limitations of Kitab-ul-Hind. ठीक है? And after that कुछ टॉपिक बचे हुए हैं हमारे अर्ली मेडिवल एज में such as the Arab conquest of Sindh, और उसके बाद हाँ चोलास भी करवाना है इस पीरियड में, मैंने शायद पहले मेंशन नहीं किया था. चोलास also we need to cover. ठीक है? With that we'll be finishing our early medieval India. फिर उसके बाद बाकी जो miscellaneous topics हैं और medieval India शुरू करेंगे. Right? That we are going to do next week. I'm ending the class now. कोई doubts तो नहीं है? आज जो क्लास में हुआ समझ में आया? हाँ. क्वालिटी ऑफ रूलर्स के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन अल-बिरूनी नहीं देता है, तो दैट इज वन ऑफ द लिमिटेशंस ऑफ अल-बिरूनी, दैट इंफॉर्मेशन अबाउट पॉलिटिकल डेवलपमेंट्स इज क्वाइट लाइट. इन फैक्ट अल-बिरूनी डज नॉट इवन मेंशन द टर्म राजपूत इन हिज बुक. ठीक है? तो ही डज नॉट अपीयर टू बी डायरेक्टली फेमिलियर विद द पॉलिटिकल डेवलपमेंट्स इन नॉर्थ इंडिया. तो ये एक उसके साथ लिमिटेशन है. But he does talk about some other political developments. For example, he talks about the invasions of Mahmud of Ghazni in great detail. He has also given a lot of information about the dynasties of Kashmir, for example. He talks about the kings of Kannauj before him. Okay? So he has talked about that people such as Harshvardhan, etc. He has talked about. So some information we receive, but a lot of contemporary political information we do not get from the Kitab-ul-Hind. Therefore, one aspect where the Kitab-ul-Hind lacks in its level of analysis is polity. ठीक है? That is there. Although हम discuss करेंगे आगे polity के बारे में, हमें discuss करना है थोड़ा बहुत जो है, but that is not one of the strengths of the Kitab-ul-Hind. Anything else? नहीं?